What's going on, guys? We are in Waxahachie, Texas this morning. Site of a really sad situation. A couple hundred gravestones were vandalized, pushed over. And so we are out here working with Atlas Preservation today to teach a group of folks how to get these restored and preserved.
Take a look at the damage here. We're told this happened sometime between Saturday afternoon and early Monday morning. About 300 headstones were damaged or knocked over.
It's tragic. This is a part of our history.
There's a history and a story behind every one of these families, and you have just destroyed some of that.
In and around some of the oldest gravestones in America, just coincidentally in Connecticut, working around graveyards from the 1600s or early 1700s. The symbolism here is very classic. It has like draperies on it, also the shaking hands. There's revival movements where in America you're gonna see a lot of those symbols represented, like the urn and the willow or Greek revival. They became kind of the primary symbols. And then also obelisks are Egyptian revival. And so we have a lot of different influences in American monuments. The thing that presents itself to me that I look at this is that it's leaning backward. Right here is an example of a fractured tablet stone. The material on the bottom here is not original. This has been reset once because you can tell by the color of it and the way it was smeared. However, this is probably associated with the vandalism, unfortunately, or I see a lot of this in storm situations with falling tree limbs and things. We can come in and see how clean these edges are, how crisp they are and sharp, and also how white it is where it's broken, which means that it broke recently, which means that it'll make a really good repair because it's concise edges. If you run your finger off over it and little bits come off, they call that sugaring, or a more technical term for that is granular disintegration, which means the stone is kind of disintegrating. We have a 2-inch thick tablet here. This is every bit of Georgia marble here. You can see the big crystals bouncing off the sun. And whenever Georgia marble breaks, it always breaks along these crystals and it has that pattern to it. It's a clean break. There's actually more chippage in the back. There's kind of some loss in the back. We only want to put it to one side. We don't want it on both sides because it's going to be too much adhesive. So what I'm going to do is just go down the center. Now, we could also use other tools to do this, obviously. And the idea is to minimize squeeze out. On the back, you can see a line that's very prominent. If it was vandalized, it got a kick from the front maybe. And so when it went backward, it chipped the edge a little bit. So we're going to put a clamp on each side. It'll keep it aligned. This is a heavy block, and this is about 1 foot thick. So marble's going to be about 150, 60 pounds a cubic foot. So this is probably a little 300-pound block. Also, you can notice here, originally this did have a pin in it. They had one center pin, however, no pin on that tier because it's more prone to topple the narrower object. So they didn't find a need to pin this big kind of block. There's a lot of confusion and misunderstanding about how they used to join marble. They did not do thick beds of mortar, ever, to my knowledge. That's a complete myth. What they did tend to do is very thin beds of like a plaster. They really like to use white lead a lot. Powdered white lead was one of their favorite materials.
Hey guys, so I'm out with Amy Borders from the city of Waxahachie. She is the communications manager with the city and has been involved a lot with the vandalism that happened here. Amy, what can you tell us a little bit about the vandalism? Did it happen, was it earlier this summer? Was it in the springtime?
It was early in the spring, towards the end of February is when it happened.
Crime Stoppers is offering a reward for tips that lead to an arrest.
They'll eventually get caught, but the damage is done. Many of them are 100, 150 years old.
Amy Borders, spokeswoman for Waxahachie, says the city is collecting donations for the repairs.
We will get everything repaired. We just want to make sure that we do it right and safely.
How many graves are we looking at that were damaged?
It's estimated at just under 300 headstones were either turned over or severely damaged.
And do you think this was something that happened during the night or something over the daytime?
Our best guess is that it did happen overnight. You know, it's hard to say. There's not cameras. It is kind of hidden back here. It's a large cemetery, so nobody really saw anything. There is a hike and bike trail that actually runs alongside of the cemetery, and so it's heavily used. So people are up and down the hike and bike trail all day during the day, and no one saw anything. So that's why we kind of tend to think it happened at night.
I was here early this morning, and I saw lots and lots of runners
and walkers
out.
And
yeah.
Okay, now I could walk it on here without it ever going stone on stone. And I could take some of those little thin half-inch blocks, and I'm gonna raise it up onto those now. I try to keep this pretty consistent and pretty thick and just stretch it in place. Don't push it against the blocks. I'm gonna come up like this. Now you don't put your fingers under at this point. A safer thing is probably use a block, so that if it slips, it won't crush my fingers. Okay, now I'm gonna lower it down. Now we'll get it to seat itself. You always need spacers between stones. Stone can never touch the other piece of stone or it'll chip, crack, or break it. So we go under, we're gonna tip it up, pull the block, put the compound in, no fingers underneath.
What is the city doing in terms of the restoration work? So we're out here today with a class to educate people with Atlas Preservation in their 48-state tour. But is the city undertaking a fundraising campaign and looking to mobilize volunteers? Are they bringing in professionals to do the restoration work? Or what's the city looking to do with this?
Well, sort of all of the above of the things that you mentioned. We do have a fund at the city that people have donated to that's just been a really generous outpouring of support from the community. We also have a local group, Historic Waxahachie Inc. They've kind of facilitated their own fundraising effort too, which has been huge. We received a grant from the Waxahachie Foundation. So all those things together are sort of inching our way to having the funding to make sure that we do it properly. We also want to make sure that we take our time. We do enlist the help of experts because this is a very detailed process and we want to make sure that it's done correctly.
Absolutely.
Not just fast, but correctly.
Absolutely. So we're just south of the Dallas-Fort Worth area. What can you tell me about Waxahachie, its history? Who founded this area? What it's known for? What type of population are we looking at?
Our current population is right at 43,000. And Waxahachie is a very, very historic city. We were founded in 1850. So a lot of these headstones, I think the earliest one is 1853 here in this particular cemetery, the city cemetery. We've got dual rail here, so the railroad still comes through, and that helped build our city. More than anything, we were the cotton capital of the entire United States. Ellis County produced at one time more cotton than any other county in the country.
Wow.
Back then, cotton was a very lucrative crop, and so that's where you see a lot of these big antebellum houses and things like that that still exist. The people that lived here farmed, and they had the money to build houses like that.
And there's a lot of beautiful houses. Just as driving into the cemetery, there's a historic driving tour, and it ends right here at the cemetery.
Yes.
That was really, really interesting to see. It's a beautiful cemetery, and there's a lot of really gorgeous houses that are in the area.
We have hundreds of really well-maintained, beautiful historic properties. We're very fortunate.
Awesome. Cool. Well, thanks for coming out with us, Amy, and appreciate the work that the city's doing to get these
And
cemeteries.
thank y'all for coming and doing this too.